By the way, may I ask, I would love one of those photos until I have my first grandbaby. But none of my girls are married yet, so hopefully it'll be a long time. I mean,
I will be sure to send you one.
Well, there we are. So let's get this all started. And I'll start with Alberto. I mean, all of you have been doing this for so long, and the work that you have is really provocative because it suggests the exact opposite of what the people to your right and to your left think and maybe have shown. But are you suggesting that perhaps it is just the fact that with the Optima, with that device, with that removable cast walker, perhaps that's just offloading to a superior extent over previous removable cast walkers, and therefore pound for pound, step for step, you're getting more prevention, even if the person isn't wearing it? And I know you also talked about that these people had recurrent lesions, but you can argue either way for that.
Well, the results of this particular study, as you may imagine, surprises me too, us too. But the real interesting aspects of this is that we were retrospectively seeing what the standard was before these new devices adoption, and the standard was very poor indeed. So what was the idea at the end was this one: are there correct information at the base of what we daily do in our practice? Because if you talk with the patient and we force at the end them to adopt irremovable devices, this is something that you impose to him. If you this introducing the relationship sort of bias.
In fact, I'm with you. We had a great discussion yesterday at one of the workshops about this very issue, and that may very well be a really nice kind of bias to have because you're influencing all of that. Jan, you were going after the mic.
Not particularly. I think I made the point in my talk is that I mean, we use removable devices all the time, but we track outcomes, and we tell the patients, the studies show that if I give you this device, it won't do as well, and it's because you won't use it. So it's your choice. Use it, and that's great because you'll get the result, and you can take it off at night to sleep, or don't use it, and you won't get the outcome.
So to that extent, Siko, I mean, having written, just spending a good deal of your life over the last year, and that's a Herculean task that no one will ever thank you for other than here, putting together the new guidelines. That sort of flies in the face of the guidelines, but would you suggest that maybe we have a little bit of play here? Perhaps we can measure the trajectory of healing in some of these patients, and if the trajectory is an acceptable level, let's say that they're healing by 15% at 1 week and 50% at 4 weeks, which seem to be associated in removable and irremovable studies with healing. Do you think that's an acceptable compromise for some of these patients, particularly neuroischemic patients?
Well, I think when it comes to practice, there's always these options that you can think of applying where, and I think that's the experience also from the left here, is that there are patients that will be very adherent to wearing their devices, so they don't need a non-removable device. But I'm happy to hear that it's left to them. And if you can, as a parameter, find that even though using removable devices you are reducing ulcer size and making a good effort, then that is a good way to go. The thing that we use for the guidelines that you're referring to is always that you do a systematic review on the available evidence. And very interestingly, in 2013, 2 meta-analyses and systematic reviews have come out that have sort of changed a little bit the paradigm from what we traditionally thought was only sort of a TCC versus the rest kind of battle, has changed to more a non-removable offloading versus removable offloading kind of battle. And since that's sort of the main piece of evidence that we have now, that's what we put in the guidelines. But of course, Alberto's trial is from more recent, and the Faglia trial is maybe from less recent, but it's still only just one study among 9 who still show that the non-removable is more effective. So maybe the next time that we write guidelines, it will change a little bit again.
Maybe a little bit of slack cut for our patients. But so Alberto, forgive me, because I usually have a pretty good grasp of the literature, but is there anything comparing the Optima? I mean, the Optima is a beautiful device. You can see it, and it's so Italian, FYI. I mean, it just really is. And it's beautiful every time I look at it. And I'm excited it's available in the U.S. now for the first time. But is it? Have there been efforts to compare it to the DH Walker in the past? Because that's an easy study. Just compare the Letavity 96 diabetes care study and just repeat it.
The problem in my place is that I am alone with another doctor and 2 nurses, and they have to deliver a lot of assistance. So we have to
well, you have Siko and Bijan Najafi to help you out on this.
They will come.
I think
Siko will come.
But I think maybe Bijan can help with that as well. One of you two. It's a shorter flight for Siko.
Let me make one more comment, David, and that is that we absolutely have patients who say, you know what, make my cast irremovable because I don't trust myself.
Isn't it interesting? And sometimes, you have this dialogue with the patient. Right. And usually when you have that, I would say 9 times out of 10, people will select the irremovable device. In my experience, if they see that you really care about it and you're sharing with them those data, I think that's part of the dynamic. It's a practice, right, of medicine. You guys have been so patient.
Great talks. For the panelists, adult behavior changes with looking at the way people approach their shoe wear in the house, particularly when you talk about modifiable behaviors. It seems like one of the biggest challenges we face is what they do in the house, if they're standing and walking without having anything on their feet. And what, in your experience, is a practical approach to what people will use in the house? I know there's a huge amount of variability. Last year, one of the speakers from India, I think, spoke about silicone socks or something along those lines that I thought was very intriguing. It's inexpensive and possibly would go into some focus. But what do you guys think? I like Bijan's idea that with the sensor, I wonder if it would almost keep like a big brother is watching you attitude that creates some other approach that they have to download and show you what they did.
Bijan.
Yeah, I mean, the point is that I believe that we need to create opportunity for the patient to take care of their own health. We need to educate patient and continue education. Maybe we need to highlight the harmful events for the patient. I believe that now the technology is available to address those kind of the research questions. We may create even the carpets now for the patient that when they walk, they notify to them that, hey, you develop a callus on your right toe, so you need to take care of them.
And a magic carpet.
So I believe that we are going really to the age of the smart environment. I understand the concept of the privacy, but it seems that at least our pilot study shows that patients are open to receive this kind of the feedback, and they actually respond to those kind of the feedback. So we have a follow-up results that we present in Netherlands that actually shows the responsiveness of those patients to those kind of the alerts that they are receiving, and based on the alerts they can change their behavior as well. But of course we are at the beginning of the research.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question that you ask, and I agree that where we have to focus, of course, on educating the patient, we have to help the patient as well. And I think we have a good example in the Netherlands where half of the insurance companies already reimburse specific offloading footwear for indoors. And it's created from the same last as the outdoor footwear. So when you get your outdoor footwear, they can create for a very low price, because they don't have to do a lot of the preparation work, a specific shoe for indoor, which has the same sort of construction concerning everything that's below your foot, but it's much more easy usable for all the material on top. So it's easy to put on, it uses lightweight material, it's ready in like 2 weeks instead of 8-9 weeks. So, and this is something that a lot of patients have started using now and are very happy with, because there are several reasons that I can also understand why patients would want to take off their footwear from coming outside, going inside. And this, I think, would be a very good solution to help them.
Exactly. And what's happening now, and what's so exciting, is that many of these devices that exist now, I mean, Bijan showed several, but the sensory substitution device, the Orpix device looks really interesting. I mean, the data are really encouraging as the form factor continues to iterate and improve. People seem to be liking that better, but then maybe you marry that with a suite of other technologies that are designed to protect your foot that all communicate with one another. And this is really important when we talk about creating a kind of there's a term called Bi-Fi for biological Wi-Fi, where these things can talk to one another. You know, watches to insoles to other tools, or even internal sensors like you heard about this morning. But if we start doing that, and that's now and out, I think it's going to be exciting, because we'll be able to evaluate a lot of these data, and we'll be confused initially, but maybe less confused than we are now.
Another thing that is now, David, is our capacity to interact with our patients. And Loretta's sitting there. Loretta, close your ears for now. Psychology. I mean, this is what it's about. Everybody talks about education. It turns out education really isn't what changes behavior. Some of our patients who are given shoes simply think they're for outdoors, unless you tell them that they're supposed to use them indoors as well. They may or may not mind, they may not want the mud, but they may just start out thinking it's just for outdoor use. These are really nice shoes. I'll use them on Sundays when I go to church. So, not just education, but motivation. And what I like to think about is go home with the patient. What do you do when you get up? What do you do for breakfast? What do you do when you go to work? What do you do for leisure? You ride horses. Okay, we have to figure out how to help you ride horses with your shoes. And we do those kinds of things. I think that's critically important.
So while I was listening to your talk, I got 3 separate texts from people asking me about, one asked me about shoes, and 2 people asked me about thermometers at the hardware store because they're using them to check the skin temperature on their feet. And I was just texting them back, but that interaction, it doesn't matter what I'm telling them for the most part. I mean, come on. I mean, for me, I'm not sure I would trust my own advice, but what matters is the interaction, and that's what's great. Yes, sir.
Just a real simple question. I find that I can I can put into remission wounds on the left foot more than the right, simply because of driving. A patient will go into a total contact cast on the left because they can still drive, but if it's on the right foot, they can't drive, so they want the removable. Do you let your patient, but when your patient asks, doctor, can I drive in this total contact cast on my right, what advice do you give them? And if they get in an accident, I don't know what goes on there. If the cop finds out they have this big cast on their side and the doctor said, yeah, go ahead and drive.
Alberto,
I know it seems silly, but it comes up on a daily basis with my patients.
I don't think this is silly at all. This is one of the most common things. Albert, on the autostrada, what do you
we strongly suggest them not to drive.
In their Fiat.
But probably in the United States, especially in Los Angeles, this could be a different problem than in my place, in which you can walk 20 minutes or bike 20 minutes from one side to the other of the town. So this is not an issue in my place.
Well, I would just say, considering how the people drive in Italy, it seems like they're all wearing a cast on their right foot.
This is the point. And I've never been driven. Well, there we are. Well done. That was a real Dutch kind of dig, and Jan's Czech as well, but he's kind of mellowed a little coming to America. Yes, ma'am.
To try and answer your question,
there's more.
To try and answer your question. So legally, as I understand it, it's not your responsibility. It's up to any given person to decide whether he or she is capable of driving or not. That's the legal position, as I understand it. I'm not a lawyer. But we face this all the time too, and that's a situation where a person may well choose a removable device that they remove just for driving. And again, I quote unquote go home with the patient. This is the reality. You have to drive. But if you don't put your removable cast walker on as you're getting out of the car, you're not going to heal.
Ma'am, I think you were waiting.
So, gentlemen, I'm a registered nurse. I'm also a certified foot care nurse, and I have to say, throughout this whole conference, you have not actually anybody mention the importance of nursing in foot care. I think that there are probably about 15 or 16 of us sitting in your room. And what we see is we don't see the vascular parts, and we see the person who is the arthritic or the older person who can't actually touch their feet. Many of them are diabetic, but many of them, that baby is really cute, but have you seen a 60-year-old try and do that? It just doesn't work. So my question for you is, I see a lot of people who are trying their best to prevent foot problems from happening. They go into Walmart, they go down to Walgreens, they look at the orthotics and they go foam, keep going from there. And they're really, really trying. They are also trying to go to their general practitioner, and the general practitioner doesn't even look at their feet. I believe the diabetic guidelines say, look at your feet once a year. So we as nurses, we get these people coming in with the the long toenails and stuff like that, and we take a look at their calluses, and we do our best to prevent that. Who in this room is actually wearing a pair of orthotics? Okay, that's the first question. So if we're not doing what we say we're supposed to do, we have a hard time telling our patients that we need to do that. I wear a pair of orthotics. They cost me $240, right? Because I'm also a med-surg nurse, right? Those were custom made for me. I don't have diabetes. I don't have problems. I have a couple of calluses that I occasionally take care of. But if we're not practicing our own medicine, how is it that all this research is going to get down to the general practitioner level, to the person who goes to Walgreens or to the person who goes to the foot store? I want to know how you're going to get it down to the base level.
Well, your question is terrific, I would say. And I will tell you, we have totally screwed up by not talking about foot care nurses. But your point about wearing orthotics, look, I don't take insulin, largely because I don't have diabetes. Am I not practicing what I'm preaching, to tell my patients to be euglycemic? I think it's sort of the same thing. If you haven't lost the gift of pain, God bless you, as a healthy sneeze, as we've learned from time immemorial, then the likelihood of you getting a wound is extraordinarily low. You're no more likely to get a wound than I am, so you're no more likely to benefit from customized orthoses that we're talking about than in terms of preventing a wound.
Didn't we talk about not ever getting there? So, pardon me, sir, you're not 93 years old, and occasionally hopefully you will get there. But if you practice what you're preaching to your pre-diabetic people, to your children, to all the way down to say, hey, you know what? You need to be looking at your feet earlier on. We need to trickle this down to the basic education so that we don't get to the diabetic foot.
I tell you, on that, we agree 100%. Okay. And that's a terrific point. Yes, sir. I think you were next.
Hi, I'm Kanishka from Sri Lanka.
Oh, Sri Lanka. There we are. The home of the Total Contact cast. Milroy Paul. There we are.
So my question is, if we take this complication, it has been here for years and ages. So in terms of the innovation happening around this area, for example, targeting the patient protection is very limited. So what's the main reason behind that? And why the diabetic patient, again, is not aware of this condition, or they don't want to go into these new tech developments of socks, of insoles and so on? What's the reason behind that?
So one thing that we should consider is that the process of the offloading for the wounds is a process that can go to several weeks. And for protection of the prevention of foot ulcers, that is for life. So you can imagine, and this is what we reflect in our results, the first 4 weeks it seems that the patient try to have adherence to wear this device. But after 4 weeks, it becomes really difficult. And this is the problem that is started. And that's, I believe, is a challenge, what we can do to trigger the enthusiasm of this patient and motivate them to continue to have adherence to those kind of the preventive care. And that's a big challenge.
Professor.
My question has to do with what are the key variables. This is a great session, by the way, and I'm new in the space, so I'm thinking like the scientist engineer. what are the key variables? We've seen, you have your classic paper about the contact cast. We heard the data from Italy, pretty good results with the cast being removable. So the point is it pressure times time? And what would be the key things you'd like to measure? Is it the issue of material properties of that lesion? I like your idea of starting to look at healing, temperature, flow. I mean, if you take the cast off and you have no pressure and then you put it right back, would you not get the same result?
Sico Bus and then Alberto, because Alberto, you can refer to some of the studies that you did years earlier. Sico. Formula, magic formula, grand unifying theory,
right.
Kind of string theory, or maybe in this case shoelace theory, into.
Just to understand, what parameters?
David's point is the contact cast. You can't, you can move, but everything is immobile.
He's talking about this.
There's distribution of stress, and it seems to me that that's the main thing. It's not the issue of whether the cast came off or not, because there are patient compliance, comfort issues, smell, hygiene, etc. And so is the real variable the stress distribution over time? And if you could do that with or without the cast being on or not, that's not the variable.
Sico, you want to answer the question, or Alberto?
Well, the one thing that I have found out from the footwear trial that we did is that it's a very complex equation where you're relating pressure to activity and to adherence to define a sort of a cumulative stress kind of parameter, and we don't find a significant association between this cumulative stress parameter, which is based on barefoot pressure, in-shoe pressure, adherence, and activity, in terms of explaining the recurrence of the ulceration. So,
what about shear?
Well, I would say that the very main parameter that is not included and cannot be included up until now within this sort of model is the shear stress. And because we found that the pre-ulcerative lesions was by far the most dominant factor in explaining the foot ulcers, of which most were abandoned forms of callus, we think that the shear component will play an important role. But when I talk to the pressure measurement companies, some of them have been testing far back some sort of
shear transducer,
prototype shear transducers, but it's not an area where anybody is really progressing in. So I don't know if we're going to find that solution very soon.
Well, clinically speaking, I think you have to separate the two conditions, because those what you can observe in following the neuropathic ulceration is not the same that you have to focus on when you deal with the Charcot foot patient, for instance. In neuropathic ulceration, the ulcer mainly is the target, and you see the reduction of callus and so on. In Charcot foot, edema reduction, temperature reduction, and if present, relief of pain are the main evaluation parameters that you have. We measure the circumferences in different sites of the foot and the leg, and compare over time, and temperature as well. So it depends really, from my point of view, on which kind of patient you have to address.
Should you devise different devices for those two conditions?
Yeah, but of course, because if you have to, for instance, follow up a Charcot foot patient, considering a first episode of Charcot, you have to think, you have to plan minimum 6 months of offloading. You cannot simply prescribe to this patient the same limitations that you can give to a patient whose course is probably 1 month or even less. So you have to have a strategy, different strategy, and different parameters and different endpoints. Otherwise, it's like managing all cardiac patients with the same drug.
I agree. I mean,
Bijan, did you want to finish us off?
Yes. Actually, the comment that I have is that I believe that it's a general mistake that if you're thinking that the problem is just because of walking or cumulative stress. With this study, in diabetes, walking is just 3 to 7% of total activity. Other food loading condition could be dangerous. For instance, I'm sitting, and actually I noticed that involuntarily, while I'm sitting, I transfer too much load on my forefoot area, and actually my foot now is hurting. So imagine the same scenario in somebody that's sitting and transfer too much load to the forefoot area while sitting. That could be dangerous. Or as I mentioned, the standing, simply the people that are stand, they transfer the load to, for example, one of the spot, and that can lead to the ulceration. So the problem is much more complex than we are thinking about it. So that's why that my dream is really creating some smart environments that identify all of them and can notify us. Doesn't matter what type of activity we are doing. If you're doing some dangerous event or we transfer too much load on one spot for a long period of the time, this is the part that we need to pay attention to.
So maybe we need continuous Holter monitoring for your foot.
Well, it's a Holter. That's what these devices are. They are Holter monitors for your life, basically. Right. It's not just for your heart. And all of this other stuff, other than steps, are like, including shear, are like dark matter. And we think they're important. They probably occupy a lot of the mass of our universe, but and they exert a role on what we're trying to measure. But it's been hard to measure. But now we're starting to see little bosons, if you will. So this is exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, while we have not discovered the podiatric God particle, I think we really talked about a lot of great stuff. And for all of you at home, tweeting me again, this has been great. And for you, and your fortitude is extremely impressive. And go out, you've earned yourself a break. Thank you so much.